Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. So here I am, uh, and I decided it's now or never. I need to tell my story. I know I have a story that's been on my heart, on my mind. It consumes me daily, this story, and I need to go ahead and get it out of my system and share it. Now, by no stretch of the imagination am I a professional storyteller, and I'm nervous as all get out right now, but I'm just going to tell my story. I'm just going to talk to you guys just like I would be having a conversation with anybody else. So I want to share my story, and I'm going to start by saying that all of my working history, guys, I've been servicing special needs children and adults to some capacity, whether it be in direct care, or scheduling their meetings, or taking them on outings, or all my working history. As a matter of fact, at one point in my life, those were the only jobs that I could secure. Those were the only jobs I could get, and I would take the jobs only because I'm just going to be honest, it was just for the paycheck. I did it for the paycheck. And it was at a time of my life when I know I needed to work, and I needed a job fast. And if anyone that's worked in direct care, or facilities with people with special needs, those jobs tend to hire more. They hire quicker than most employers. So that's where I was, and at that time of my life, that's exactly where I was. I had no college degree. I had, it was just for the paycheck. So anyway, my husband and I have 4 children between us. He has a daughter, who's my bonus daughter, his firstborn. So we have 5 children, and our 4th child, Jordan, when we had him, we were living in Texas, and Jordan was one of the more difficult pregnancies that I had. But all the diagnoses were good, everything looked good, the ultrasounds, everything, his heart rate, everything, it was wonderful. But let me go back a little bit. As I said before, all of my working history, I've been servicing special needs children and adults, and these needs were from one end of the spectrum to another. With people that were in wheelchairs, people that had anger management issues, people that intellectually disabilities, the whole spectrum. I've serviced the whole spectrum pretty much. Schizophrenic adults and children, bipolar disorders, OCDs. I even had an instance where I had a client at a mental health facility that I worked at in Florida, and I had a client who his obsession was way back then computers. Believe it or not, he had an obsession. He's fixated on computers and the way they work, and his thing was, what turned him on was if we would get like an old computer that didn't really work, okay, but someone donated an old computer just so he could take it apart piece by piece and inspect the pieces and then put it back together. It didn't work, of course, but he'd put it back together. And this kid was a genius. He knew everything about way back then, he knew everything about programming, and anyway, I had another client whose obsession was trains, and we thought it would be best if we took him, because he had earned a privilege of an outing, and we thought it would be wonderful to take him out to a train station. This is when I lived in California, so there was a little train station in Antioch, California, or either Pittsburgh or Antioch. But we took him there. It was like a train museum, and we took him as a reward because if he had good, like a couple months of good behavior and no outbreaks of no crisis episodes or anything like that. So we took him as a reward. And when we took him, and I remember his OCD, which stands for obsessive compulsive disorder, his was trains, fixation on trains. Just his whole life was trains. And so we took him to the train station thinking, oh, this would be a great idea for him, the train museum, not realizing it was the worst thing we could have ever done, because in the end, when it was time to go back to the school, he fought, he kicked, he screamed, he almost tore us apart because he did not want to leave. He had found his nirvana, and that was it. He was there. I don't need anything else. I don't need to eat. I just stay here. And he was determined to stay there. So anyway, we ended up having to get him in the back seat of one of the staff members' car and sit on both sides of him. Like one staff member sat on this side and one sat on the other side, of him, just to keep him in the car and get back to the school. And we learned from that. He fought us, he bit us, he spit on us. I mean, he did everything he could to try to get out of that car and stay at the train museum. But anyway, these are just to give you an idea of what type of people that I've worked with in my working history. I love the fact that I can be honest with myself and say that at first it was for the paycheck. It was all about the money. I just needed a job, and those were the jobs. It was either that or telemarketing. Those are the jobs that would offer me the quickest results, the quickest hire, So it went from there to working in another mental health facility that I worked in, and these people were developmentally disabled, intellectually disabled, and they lived there. This was their home. And so I was one of the direct care staff there, and I actually applied for the receptionist position. They were hiring for a receptionist position at that job, and I went and applied for that. But one of the clients came into the room where I was being interviewed and just like clicked with me, and I clicked with her. It's like I felt like I knew this little girl all my life. We just laughed it up like we knew each other for. She interrogated me and asked me all my business. We just talked, and right then and there, the director told me, she said, you would be so good in our special needs department. Here we go again. I knew it, and it worked. It worked out because it was at that job that I approached my turning point. And when I say my turning point, I mean that instead of going just for a paycheck, it was then that I realized it was more than that for me. It was, I saw a poster on the wall one day as I was in one of the houses, because they had like 3 houses that the clients lived in. And I worked in house 3. And I remember going into one of the other houses, I think like house 1, which is where the main office was located. I remember going over there to get something or to take something, whatever reason. I was over at house 1. And I happened to walk down one of the halls and I saw a poster on the wall. And this poster said, and I'm going to say it, I'm going to think about it for a second and then I'm going to say it. But the poster said, imagine going through your whole life knowing that your only friends were people who were paid to be with you. Yeah. And, imagine living your whole life knowing your only friends were people that were paid to be with you. We were their friends. We were their livelihood. We brought the music and we brought the entertainment to them, and they just lived at that house, and we would take them out on outings, shopping for skill developments, and but we were their friends. But of course, if we weren't paid to be there, we wouldn't be there. And when I read that poster, it just oh my God, you jerk. And I just felt so low knowing that I was just there. And it's not that even though I was there for a paycheck, I wasn't mean to the clients. I've always loved them so much. I've always really taken to them, like the lady said. She saw it in me right away when she hired me for the direct care position. It's just that poster, man, it just turned me around. It just shook my soul, shook me to my core. And from that point on, I was like, who am I? Who am I to, just be somebody's friend just because of a paycheck? I'm not that kind of person, So I stopped that mess and I focused all my energy and I prayed about it, and I devoted my life to special needs children and adults. And to this day, I've grown so much in that field. I've grown so much. I've gotten to certifications, degrees. I've taught in classrooms. I've gotten so far as to become an admin, where I was scheduling ARD meetings, which are individualized education plans, or IEPs. I ended up being, that was the exit for me. I ended up having my own office at a high school in Texas. Shout out to Vista Ridge High School. I love you guys so much. But I grew. I worked in elementary, K through 12, and then beyond. Like I said, Spectrum Center in Pittsburgh, California. I worked there, and for years, these are the jobs as much as I was, there for the paycheck back then. Those are the jobs that I kept longer than any jobs that I've ever had, by the way. But anyway, I went on, and like I said, from that poster, it just sunk in right here. It hit me in the heart real bad, shook my whole core, and I turned it around. I stopped just going for the paycheck. I started going for the people and caring, and just really, I would go to, the store on the weekends and go look forward to taking one of my clients a gift for their birthday, and just, I was really that friend that, and of course they would train us not to become so attached. Because, let's face it, a lot of these people were some of them were ill to the point where they were, they had feeding tubes, and their life expectancy was so short that you could go into work. I remember going into work and seeing that hearse pulled up in front of the centers I was working at, seeing a hearse, from a funeral home, and the coroner's, it was police, and it was just crazy. And people were crying, and one of my clients had died. It wasn't one of the clients that I worked with directly. It was a client in one of the other houses, but had died. And all I could remember thinking was, no way, it's not supposed to happen like this. These are people, these are angels unaware. These are God's people. They're closer to God than we'll ever be again, And, it just, after that, like I said, it changed my whole perspective, my whole outlook of them, and I started loving them, and I was just like really head over heels in love with people, because I figured, working in, and I was a substitute teacher sometimes, and I would work in the general education classrooms as a sub. But what I found out, I realized that it was easier for me to work with the special needs people, children, because when someone has a reason for acting out, for being a knucklehead, it's a lot easier to deal with them and accept them than as opposed to those who just want to be knuckleheads because they're knuckleheads, So, once I changed and I realized, okay, this might just be for me, I lived my life, and I was in special education, special needs. I was doing it. I was growing. I was learning more and more. I was getting my certifications out of the way, and doing what I was, living and enjoying life, And then finally, my fourth pregnancy came around with Jordan, and my fourth pregnancy, like I said, and I ended up, Jordan was 8 months old, and he had not passed the hearing screening, which is something that they have to have, usually before they leave the hospital. Jordan was a cesarean birth, and he wouldn't pass the hearing screening. So I was, the doctors told us, we'll let you go home from the hospital after I had him, but I need you to make sure that you stay up with the, the ear, nose, and throat, ENTs, the ear, nose, and throat doctors, on regular appointments until they get this test passed, until he can pass this hearing screening. So of course I did. I got my little infant baby, and I went on home. And after that, weeks and weeks, we ended up, especially for his 6-week checkup, we ended up going to the ENT several times. And the thing is, they could not get an accurate reading because Jordan was an infant, and he moved and wiggled. If they touched his ear or side of his face to insert the hearing, he would move and wiggle, like infants do. And so they never could pass the hearing screening. So anyway, I ended up, they ended up scheduling an appointment at Dale Children's Hospital in Austin, Texas. And my husband and I took Jordan, and what they told us, the specialist had told us, they said, what we're going to do is something different that we usually don't do because he's so young. But by then, he was 8 months old. But they said that we're going to put him under. We're going to go ahead and we're going to put him under so that we can get an accurate reading. He'll be out, you know. And I was like right away discouraged about that, because I know that I don't like being put under. I don't like anesthesia. I don't like it. I don't like it. I went out. Matter of fact, when I was having Jordan, I went out kicking and screaming because they told me, you know, this isn't working. We're going to go ahead and take, you know, do the C-section. We're going to put you to sleep. And the doctor comes over my face with this mask, and he's like, just count down from 3, count backwards from 3. And I was like, no, I don't want to go to sleep. I don't know what I'm thinking about. The Michael Jackson, when you go to sleep like that and not wake up, all the above. So I was panicked at the last minute when this doctor just kind of like put this mask over my face and said, count to 3. And I was like, what? And that was it. That's all I remember is thinking, what? And that was it. And I woke up and I had a new baby boy. So praise God, from whom all blessings flow. And so anyway, going back to that, Jordan was, you know, I said all that to say that Jordan came into the world, you know, shaking up stuff. So anyway, then when he didn't pass his hearing screening, they told us to go to Dale Children's Hospital in Austin, Texas, and take him to a specialist. They're going to put him to sleep. They're going to explain to us when we get there what's going to take place. So I took my baby and my husband, and we went, and I was a nervous wreck because, like I said, I do not like anesthesia. I don't like being put under. It's like a loss of all control. I just don't like it. And I definitely didn't like it for my new baby. And so 8 months old, and they said, while we were in there, we talked to this one really sweet lady at Dale, and she was the audiologist, and she was telling us, she said, I'm actually going to be the one to perform the hearing screening, but with me on this side, she kept explaining to my husband and I, on this side, this person is going to be monitoring his heart rate, and then this person will be monitoring his breathing. This person will administer the actual anesthesia to knock him out and make sure that he stays out until we're done, and then bring them back. You know, so they was explaining to us the role that each person in the room was going to play in this. And so, of course, she was explaining it to us. She kept saying stuff like the general population of kids will usually, you know, wake up in like 10 minutes. But we noticed with the Downs kids, they wake up, you know, it takes a little bit longer. They're a little bit groggier. You know, sometimes they may throw up. You know, she was explaining to us. And then she would go on to say, and, you know, this and this with the general population of kids, but with the Downs kids, we noticed this and this. You know, she was just explaining the whole procedure. You know, we usually, you know, give them this many cc's of the anesthesia, but with the Downs kids, we give it, you know, on and on about the Downs kids in comparison to the general population of kids. So finally, my husband, after she finished explaining everything, my husband says to her, he says, ma'am, you've been referencing Downs kids this whole time. Why is that like that? And she says, oh, isn't this a Downs baby? And we just laughed, and we were like, oh, how cute. No, he's not a Downs baby. And she said, oh, I thought just, you know, I thought he was a Downs baby just by appearance. I'm sorry. I apologize. We don't have to worry about it then. And so they tested him. They got the reading, and they found out that after about 3 days, they came back and told us the report revealed that Jordan's left ear canal was completely collapsed. His left ear canal was completely collapsed, but he could still hear. You know, it's just small. The canal is very small, to the point where they couldn't even get the needle down in there for the hearing screening. But his right one was full throttle, so no problem. He's not going to have any hearing problems, just that his left hearing canal is really collapsed. That's why, you know, it was probably, if anything, when we were trying to stick those needles in there and those pins to get the reading, it was probably hurting the poor fella because they're so small. And anyway, we were glad of that. But then at the same time, when they called to tell us that news, the doctor told us, who had administered the test, she says, but we also sent in a letter to his primary care physician, his PCP, and we strongly recommend that, you know, they test this baby for Down syndrome. And so we were like, oh, here's the Down syndrome thing again. Okay, no problem. We'll do that, whatever. So, you know, 2 weeks, fast forward to 2 weeks, I had come home from working my job. I was at a high school working in the attendance office at the time. And I was, you know, the funny thing, just to go back a minute, the job that I was in the attendance office. But I would find myself often down, of course, in the special needs classrooms. And there was this one little girl that had Down syndrome that had my heart. She would come into my office. They would allow her, and as her reward, she was allowed to come into the attendance office with me and sit there and play and spin around in the chair. And I'd have her like sharpen pencils or put things in the paper shredder for me. And that was my buddy. That was my little road dog, right? And so, you know, even then, you know, I had a little friend that had Down syndrome. But then all of a sudden, like I said, fast forward 2 weeks after his, they strongly sent a letter, Dale Children's Hospital sent a letter to my son's primary care physician, who happened to be a wonderful friend of our family's. His son went to school with my son. They played on the same football team. His wife was a teacher at one of the schools that I worked. So we were very close, the doctors, you know, our family and the doctor's family. And he had to call me. I come home from my work at my job at the attendance office one day from after work, and I get a phone call, and it's my doctor, and I says hello. I said hello, and he says, "Hey, LaTanya, it's Doctor." You know, I won't say his name, and I said, "Hi, how's it going?" He said, "Well, you know, they sent that letter over from Dale saying that they want us to they strongly recommend we test Jordan for Down syndrome," and he says, "LaTanya, he does have Down syndrome." And I just heard the brakes go screech and fade to black and weak at the knees, and your heart stops and your breath escapes your body all at one time. This stuff happened to me. My mind, when he said he does have Down syndrome, I automatically, my mind tried to make the word he does mean does not. You know, it was like, oh, okay. And I said, "Can you wait a minute, tell my husband what you just said?" And so I gave the phone to my husband, and I waited and I looked at my husband and anticipated. And remember, now this happened really fast, okay? There wasn't a, you know, lapse in time. It happened really fast. I gave the phone to my husband. "Dr. Butler has something to tell you." And I looked at his face, searching my husband's face for his reaction to see if it matched mine, if he heard the same thing that I heard, that our baby had Down syndrome. And he said, "Really?" You know, and remember now, our doctor was our friend also, our family friend. He was a doctor for all of our children, and we'd known them since we moved to Texas. And really? And my husband says, and how did you miss that? And how did you miss that? And I knew then that my baby, my 8-month-old precious baby boy, beautiful baby boy, had Down syndrome. And it just took everything in me. But you know, it was at that moment, guys, it was at that moment that I heard a voice. I heard a voice, and it said, "This is what I was preparing you for all of your life." All of my working history, and I couldn't understand why I could only get those jobs. You know what I mean? Working with special needs kids and adults. Now, it was plain as day, and it dawned on me. And when I say I heard a voice, it wasn't like my voice, how I'm talking to you guys. I heard his voice. I heard God speak to me. He spoke to me, and he said, "This is what I was preparing you for. This is why you couldn't get those other jobs. I needed you where you were. I needed you to be trained. I needed to prepare you for yet. This is my biggest challenge in special education and special needs. My baby boy had Down syndrome." And the person with the least of all of the credentials, of all the specialists, the anesthesiologists, the cardio doctors, the audiologist, the one who was just there to administer the hearing exam, was the one that called it. She saw it when we went in there, and she kept referencing Down's babies. And it was like your whole life just paused. You slam on the brakes. You stop. You freeze. It's like you're frozen in time. If you ever experienced being frozen in time, we were frozen in time. And my husband, who had no idea about special needs people, or, you know, he knew that, you know, they existed, and he was kind and loving, but he just he didn't have the knowledge that I had. He had never had anyone like that in his family or anything. Was taken aback. He just had this dazed look and confused look on his face, and where I saw it, and I didn't want my kids to see Daddy fall apart. So what I did, in my, you know, being mama, I told the other the three oldest kids, I said, "Hey, go put on your shoes. We're gonna go to the YMCA. We're gonna go to the Y." So I got my kids, and I got my baby. My husband said nothing. He was just kind of like, letting it all sink in. It hit him like a truck. And I got the kids and I took them to the, remember, I had just come from work. I hadn't even took my clothes off or anything from work. I just picked up my purse, took my baby in my hands, threw a couple of Pampers in the diaper bag, bottle, and we just left out the door. And I just drove with my kids. I didn't want them to see Daddy because I felt it coming. I felt it coming. And so I took the kids and we drove. And I just drove. I ended up at the YMCA, the Twin Lakes YMCA, and I let the kids go in the little area, run wild. Remember, they didn't know anything that was going on. They was just having a good time. I let the 3 oldest ones run into Jayla, Janasia. I let them just run into the tree house. They had a little section called the tree house where they would supervise the kids as they played while the parents worked out. And I let them go into the tree house, and I took Jordan, and then I had my moment, and I sat down in a secluded table in the YMCA that evening by myself with my little fat baby boy, my 8-month-old baby boy, and I looked at him, and I just looked at him, and I must have stared at him for at least 15-20 minutes, just staring at him and looking at his fingers and his toes, and he's smiling and pulling my hair and drooling and just playing, and I just looked at him and I said a prayer, and I said, God, I'm ready. I'm ready, God. I'm ready. And I was so out of it. My kids came in about 30 minutes later, or an hour later, said that they were hungry. I forgot it was dinner time when I come home in the evening. So I fed my kids everything that they wanted out of the vending machine. I let them have Pop-Tarts and potato chips and soda and Powerade, whatever they wanted out of the vending machine, snack cakes and stuff for dinner. While I was there, that was their dinner. Because I just needed to be away from the house, away from my husband. We just needed that, for a minute, And so once it dawned, maybe a couple of hours had lapsed, and I sat there and held Jordan and played when he fell asleep. The kids said they was tired, and it's time to go back home. And when I got back home in the house, my husband, right there when you walk in the front door, there was a big hole in the wall. A big hole. He had punched a hole in the wall. He was so heartbroken. He didn't, know how to handle it like I could. So I put my kids, washed them up and put them all to bed. And we just cried together that night. We just cried, and life was on hold, and life was changed. And from that day forward, we knew that life would never be the same. But at the same time, I'm here to tell you today, I heard that voice. And it was such a knee-weakening experience to hear God talk to you like that. It was scary and overwhelming and peaceful. At the same time, I wasn't afraid, but I heard that voice, you guys. I heard a voice. And that's my story. Thank you. God bless.